A beautiful German shepherd living alone, in the wilderness for unknown reasons. A young couple spots him on their hiking trail and makes it their mission to gain his trust. For 12 long months they try everything to rescue this magnificent but terrified dog, facing setbacks, heartbreak, and moments of hope just when they're about to give up. Something absolutely incredible happens that no one could have predicted. Get ready for a story of perseverance, compassion, and a bond that defies all expectations. This journey will change the way you think about trust, patience, and the extraordinary connection possible between humans and animals. The wilderness area outside Boulder, Colorado, revealed its mysteries slowly to those patient enough to notice them. For Sarah Jenkins and Mike Coleman, both avid hikers in their early 30s, a remote trail system had become their weekend sanctuary, and escape from their demanding careers in software development and physical therapy. It was on a crisp October morning when they first spotted him, a flash of black and tan fur disappearing behind a rocky outcrop on a lesser-used trail. Only a glimpse, but unmistakably a German shepherd. "Did you see that?" Sarah whispered, gripping Mike's arm. "That was definitely a dog." Mike nodded, squinting in the direction the animal had vanished. Way too big for a coyote, somebody's pet. Maybe. They continued cautiously along the trail until they reached a small clearing. There, approximately 50 yards away, stood the German shepherd. His coat, though dirty, showed the classic black saddle marking over tan fur. His ears stood alert, body tense and ready for flight. Most striking were his eyes, amber colored and filled with a weariness that spoke of prolonged isolation. "He doesn't have a collar," Sarah observed, keeping her voice low. "And look how thin he is indeed." The dog's ribs were visible even at this distance, his powerful frame diminished by what appeared to be months of inadequate nutrition. A long scar ran along his left flank, the fur never having grown back properly. When Mike shifted his weight, stepping on a twig that snapped loudly in the quiet forest, the shepherd bolted, disappearing into the dense underbrush with remarkable speed. "He's terrified," Mike said, the concern evident in his voice. "But he doesn't look feral. That's a domestic dog." Sarah was already pulling out her phone, searching for local lost pet listings. "Nothing here about a missing German shepherd." "I'll check with the ranger station." On our way out, the ranger, a weathered woman in her 50s named Diane, confirmed their suspicions. "That's Ghost," she explained. "Been out there at least 6 months that we know of. People spot him occasionally, always alone, always keeps his distance. Has anyone tried to catch him?" Sarah asked. Diane nodded grimly. "Animal controls made 3 attempts. He's too smart, too fast, knows these mountains better than most of the rangers." "Now, any idea where he came from?" Mike inquired. "Some hikers reported a car abandoned at a remote trailhead last winter. By the time rangers investigated, the vehicle was covered in snow. When they finally towed it in spring, they found camping gear, some dog food, but no sign of the owner. Search and rescue found nothing. Our theory is the dog belonged to whoever abandoned that car." The story haunted Sarah and Mike throughout their drive home. The image of the shepherd alone, surviving somehow in the wilderness while clearly being a domestic animal, tugged at something deep within them. "We could try," Sarah said, finally breaking the contemplative silence in the car, "to gain his trust." "One mean?" Mike glanced at her, recognizing the determined set of her jaw. After 7 years together, he knew that expression. "Well, it could take months." He cautioned. "If animal control couldn't catch him, they try to trap him." Sarah interrupted. "That's different from earning his trust." That night they researched wilderness dog rescues, learning about feral dogs' trauma responses and techniques for gaining trust with minimal human contact. What began as a concerned conversation evolved into something more, a mission that would test their patients' ingenuity and commitment in ways neither could anticipate. The next morning they returned to the trail with high quality dog food, a long-range camera, and the first entries in what would become journals documenting their year-long journey to rescue the shepherd they now called Ghost. November brought early snow to the Colorado mountains, blanketing the trails where Ghost roamed. Sarah and Mike established a routine, visiting the same clearing every Saturday and Sunday morning, leaving food in the same spot each time. For the first 3 weekends, the food remained untouched until they left, then mysteriously disappeared while they watched from a distance with binoculars. "He's watching us," Mike observed on their 4th weekend. "He waits until we walk away, then comes for the food once he thinks it's safe." They began leaving a trail camera disguised among the rocks. The first night photos revealed Ghost approaching the feeding spot with extreme caution, circling several times, ears constantly moving, body tense and ready to flee. His condition appeared worse than they had initially thought. The scar on his flank was joined by another on his shoulder, possibly from an encounter with a mountain lion or coyotes. He's surviving, but just barely, Sarah said, studying the images. Winter's going to be hard on him. They upgraded their offerings, higher calorie foods, meat they cooked specifically for him. They left old blankets nearby, though these remained untouched, as Ghost clearly preferred to bed down in locations unknown to them. December brought a breakthrough. Returning to the clearing, they found Ghost waiting, watching from approximately 100 yards away. He no longer fled immediately upon seeing them, but maintained his distance, observing their movements with cautious intelligence. "Progress," Sarah whispered carefully, placing the food in their usual spot. "He's associating us with food, not danger." Mike nodded, but his expression remained concerned. "The temperature is dropping to negative digits next week. I don't know how he'll survive the heart of winter out here." They consulted with a wildlife veterinarian who specialized in wolf rehabilitation. Dr. Abernathy offered both encouragement and caution. "German shepherds are remarkably adaptable," she explained. "Their coat will thicken for winter, and they have the intelligence to find shelter, but you're right to be concerned without adequate nutrition and proper shelter. Winter poses a serious threat," she suggested. They built a simple shelter near their feeding station, nothing fancy, just a 3-sided wooden structure filled with straw that will provide windbreak and insulation, make it large enough that he doesn't feel trapped with the opening facing away from prevailing winds. The weekend before Christmas, they hauled materials up the increasingly difficult trail and constructed the shelter. The trail camera later confirmed what they had hoped. After 5 days of cautious investigation, Ghost began using it during particularly cold nights, though he never remained there during daylight hours. January and February passed with agonizing slowness. Heavy snows sometimes made the trail impassable, forcing them to skip weekends each time they returned. They feared Ghost might succumb to the elements or predators, only to find fresh tracks around the feeding station and occasional glimpses of him watching from the tree. And by March, when the first hints of spring began softening the mountain landscape, Ghost had established a new pattern. He would wait in the same spot approximately 70 yards from their meeting place, watching as they left food. Once they retreated to what he deemed a safe distance, about 50 yards now rather than the 100 it had been initially, he would approach the food. "He's testing boundaries," Dr. Abernathy confirmed when they sent her video. "That's excellent progress. Is safe zone is shrinking, yet despite months of patience, they seem no closer to actually rescuing Ghost." He remained firmly wild, accepting their provisions but maintaining his independence. Sarah and Mike began to question whether full rescue was even the right goal. "Maybe this is enough," Mike suggested one evening as they reviewed their journals. "He's healthier, has shelter when he needs it. We're helping him survive." Sarah nodded, but her eyes reflected a deeper concern, but what happens when we can't come anymore, or when he gets sick, or hurt too badly to feed himself? He doesn't belong out here, Mike. He was someone's pet. Once what neither of them knew as spring slowly transformed the mountains was that their greatest challenging ghosts still lay ahead. April brought renewal to the Colorado wilderness. Wildflowers erupted across meadows, aspens unfurled. Fresh leaves and wildlife emerged from winter hideaways with new offspring in tow. Ghost 2 showed signs of renewal, his coat thicker, his frame less gaunt, his movements more confident. Across the familiar territory he now claimed as his domain. Sarah and Mike documented these changes meticulously. Their weekend visits had become sacred routine, their connection to ghosts evolving into something neither had anticipated. Though still unable to approach him directly, they felt a growing relationship with the shepherd who now waited for them each weekend, recognizable to them by the distinctive pattern of his markings and the old scars that mapped the survival story. "I brought something different today," Sarah said. On a particularly beautiful spring morning, she pulled a tennis ball from her pack. "Maybe he remembers how to play." Mike looked skeptical. "That's a pretty big leap from just watching us from a distance. We've been at this 6 months. Mike, we need to try something new." After leaving their usual food offering, Sarah rolled the bright yellow ball halfway between their position and Ghost's usual waiting spot. Then they retreated to their observation point and waited. Ghost approached the food with his typical caution, but stopped abruptly upon noticing the ball. His ears perked forward, head tilting in a gesture so quintessentially canine that Sarah gasped softly. "He recognizes it," she whispered. The shepherd circled the ball several times, never touching it before, taking the food and retreating. But the following weekend, when they repeated the experiment, Ghost approached the ball directly after finishing the food. He sniffed it thoroughly, pawed at it once, then picked it up gently in his mouth. Instead of taking away, he dropped it and looked directly at them for the first time, a moment of connection that brought tears to Sarah's eyes. "He remembers," Mike said quietly. "Someone taught him to fetch once they didn't throw the ball. That boundary remained uncrossed." But Ghost's acknowledgement of the toy represented a significant shift in their relationship. The ball became part of their ritual, sometimes moved overnight to different positions, evidence that Ghosts played with it when they weren't present. May brought unexpected challenges. Heavy spring rains washed out sections of the trail, making access to Ghost territory difficult and dangerous. During a particularly bad storm, they missed 2 consecutive weekends, returning on the third with concern that their progress might have been undone by the absence. They needn't have worried. Ghost waited at his usual observation point, and when they left the food and retreated, he approached more quickly than ever before. That day, he did something unprecedented. After eating, he picked up the tennis ball, carried it halfway to their position, set it down, and watched them expectantly. "Oh my God," Sarah breathed. "He wants us to throw it." Mike, slowly telegraphing his movements carefully, stood and approached the ball. Ghost retreated several yards, but didn't flee completely. When Mike picked up the ball and gently tossed it back toward Ghost's position, the shepherd watched its arc with focused attention. After moments hesitation, Ghost retrieved the ball and again brought it halfway between them. They played this modified long-distance version of fetch for nearly 20 minutes, the closest interaction they'd achieved in 7 months of patient effort. When they finally had to leave, Sarah was openly crying, overwhelmed by the breakthrough. "We're getting there," Mike assured her, his own voice thick with emotion. He's remembering what it means to trust humans. The following weekend, they arrived at the trail head to find it closed. A wildlife management operation was underway following reports of an aggressive mountain lion in the area. Despite their protests and explanations about Ghost, the rangers refused access. There's a big cat hunting in that exact section, explained a ranger who recognized him from previous conversations. That's why we're trying to track and relocate it. Your dog friend could be in danger if he's still there. For the first time since beginning their mission, Sarah and Mike face a reality that Ghost's wilderness life carried constant danger, and that their inability to reach him might have consequences. Beyond a missed meal that night, Sarah couldn't sleep, imagining Ghost waiting at their usual meeting spot, perhaps wondering if they had finally abandoned him as his original owner had. We're going back tomorrow, she told Mike, her voice leaving no room for discussion, even if we have to find another access point. What they discovered the next day would change everything about their mission to rescue Ghost. The unofficial trail was little more than a game pass deep and treacherous in places. Mike had discovered it on old forestry maps, a maintenance route that would bypass the official trailhead and eventually connect with their familiar path. Approximately a mile from Ghost's territory, this doesn't feel entirely legal, he admitted, as they carefully picked their way through dense underbrush. We're not disturbing wildlife or damaging anything, Sarah countered, and it's an emergency. Ghost is expecting us. The journey took nearly twice as long as their usual approach to sun high overhead. By the time they reached familiar landmarks, as they neared the clearing where they traditionally met, Ghost, an unusual sound stopped them, barking frantic and persistent, unlike anything they'd heard from the normally silent shepherd. Something's wrong, Sarah said, breaking into a jog. Despite the rough terrain, they emerged into the clearing to a shocking scene. Ghost stood at the base of a large pine tree, barking upward with focused intensity in the branches above. A mountain lion, likely the same one rangers were tracking, crouched on a thick limb, its tawny body almost invisible against the bark between the tree and Ghost lay the partially consumed carcass of a deer, evidently the big cat's kill that Ghost had either discovered or attempted to scavenge. The shepherd was effectively trapping the mountain lion in the tree, keeping it from returning to its meal, but the standoff couldn't last indefinitely. We need to leave now, Mike whispered, urgently, pulling Sarah back toward the tree. And that cat is going to come down eventually, and when it does, we can't leave him, Sarah insisted, her eyes never leaving Ghost. We don't have a choice. We're unarmed, and that's a predator defending its kill. Their whispered argument became moot when Ghost suddenly noticed their presence. For a brief moment, his attention shifted from the treed mountain lion to them. A fatal mistake in the standoff's delicate balance. The mountain lion, seizing the opportunity, launched itself from the branch, not toward its kill, but directly at Ghost. The shepherd barely had time to turn before the big cat was upon him, powerful claws raking across his already scarred flank. What happened next occurred so quickly that Sarah and Mike would later disagree about the exact sequence of events. Ghost twisted with remarkable agility, his powerful jaws clamping onto the mountain lion's forehead. The predators rolled in a blurred tan, black and golden fur, snarling and snapping in a life or death struggle. Without conscious thought, Mike grabbed a heavy fallen branch while Sarah began shouting and clapping, trying to distract the mountain lion. Mike swung the branch, not striking either animal, but creating a threatening presence near the fight. The combination of human noise, movement, and Ghost's fierce defense proved enough. The mountain lion broke away, limping rapidly into the underbrush opposite their position. Ghost remained standing, bleeding from fresh wounds across his flank and shoulder, but otherwise remarkably intact. For several seconds he stood, frozen, panting heavily, eyes darting between the humans and the direction the mountain lion had fled. Then, to their astonishment, he took a single step toward them before his legs buckled and he collapsed onto his side. Mike, Sarah cried, already moving toward the fallen shepherd. Wait, my caution, though, He too approached slowly. He's injured, and terrified he could still bite. But Ghost made no attempt to rise or defend himself as they cautiously closed the distance. His amber eyes tracked their movement, but the usual weariness had been replaced by something else. Exhaustion, pain, and perhaps a recognition that his survival now depended on the humans he'd kept at a distance for so long. "It's okay, boy," Sarah murmured, kneeling a few feet away. "We're going to help you," slowly telegraphing each movement. She extended her hand, palm down, stopping just short of touching him. Ghost's eyes never left her face, his breathing rapid and shallow. Then in a moment, neither Sarah nor Mike would ever forget, Ghost lifted his head slightly and pressed his muzzle against Sarah's outstretched fingers, the first voluntary contact in their year-long journey to gain his trust. Mike already had his phone out, simultaneously searching for the nearest veterinary clinic and trying to capture the extraordinary moment on camera. "The nearest emergency vet is 40 miles away," he reported, "and we need to figure out how to move him." Sarah nodded, tears streaming freely down her face as she gently stroked Ghost's head. "We'll figure it out. We've got you now, Ghost. We've got you." The shepherd's eyes drifted closed, his massive body finally surrendering to humans who had spent a year proving they deserved his trust. The makeshift stretcher fashioned from hiking gear and forest branches proved inadequate for transporting a 70-pound German shepherd down treacherous mountain trails. After struggling for barely half a mile, Mike tried a different approach. "Let me carry him," he suggested, carefully sliding his arms beneath Ghost's body. The shepherd whimpered but remained surprisingly docile as Mike lifted him onto his shoulders. "And firemen's carry. This will be faster," Mike grunted. "Lead the way and find the clearest path." Sarah forged ahead, identifying the safest route while glancing back frequently to check on their progress. Ghost stayed remarkably calm, his head resting against Mike's back, only occasionally releasing soft whines when movements aggravated his wounds. Their normally 40-minute hike stretched into a grueling 2-hour ordeal by the time they reached their SUV. Mike's muscles burned with fatigue, and Ghost had grown warningly quiet. "I'll drive," Sarah said, opening the back where they'd already prepared a bed of blankets, anticipating this moment since beginning their rescue mission months ago. The 40 miles journey to mountain emergency veterinary clinic was tense, Sarah pushing the speed limit while Mike called ahead. The rural roads eventually gave way to highways, then to Denver's outskirts where the clinic waited. Veterinary staff rushed out with a stretcher as they arrived, efficiently transferring Ghost from the vehicle. The shepherd remained unnaturally compliant, his fight instincts seemingly replaced by complete surrender to the humans now caring for him. "You found him in the wild?" asked Dr. Kessler, the senior veterinarian, conducting a quick assessment. "How long has he been out there?" "At least a year, that we know of," Sarah explained, watching anxiously as they started in 4. "We've been trying to rescue him for months." Dr. Kessler nodded while examining Ghost's wounds. "He's dehydrated with multiple lacerations, consistent with a predator attack, but his overall condition is better than I'd expect for a dog living feral this long." "You've been feeding him," Mike confirmed. They had been providing regular nutrition. "Will he be okay?" "Too soon to tell," Dr. Kessler replied. "Honestly, the wounds themselves aren't immediately life-threatening, but infection risk and capture stress can cause complications. We'll do everything we can." Ghost was wheeled into treatment, leaving Sarah and Mike with paperwork and difficult questions. "Owners' names," Sarah read from a form, looking at Mike. "Uncertainly put both our names," he said, without hesitation, "unless you don't want to." Hours passed before Dr. Kessler returned. "He's stable. We've cleaned and sutured the wound, started antibiotics, and he's on fluids. Most importantly, we scanned for a microchip Sarah and Mike exchanged surprise, glances having never considered this. Possibility he has won Dr. Kessler. Confirmed he's registered as Ranger. Belonging to a Matthew Carpenter from Wyoming. The unexpected information. Open a new chapter in their understanding of the dog they'd come to. Noah's ghost were legally required to attempt contact with the registered owner, Dr. Kessler explained, but given the apparent abandonment if we can't reach them or they decline to reclaim him, you would have the opportunity to adopt him. Sarah nodded, emotions conflicting on her face. Part of her had already accepted Ghost Ranger as theirs, yet knowing he had a name and history raised questions she hadn't considered. As they drove home in exhausted silence, Sarah's phone chimed with a text from Dr. Kessler. We reached Matthew Carpenter. He's driving from Wyoming tonight. Says he's been searching for Ranger for over a year. Wants to meet you both tomorrow. Sarah read the message aloud, then looked at Mike with wide eyes. He's been searching. That means Ranger wasn't abandoned. Mike finished. He was lost. Sarah and Mike arrived at the veterinary clinic early the next morning, anxious to learn more about Matthew Carpenter and how Ranger had ended up alone in the wilderness, if not abandoned. Dr. Kessler led them to a consultation room where a man in his early 40s with weathered features and a neatly trimmed beard waited. He stood as they entered, his expression mixing gratitude with emotional exhaustion. Sarah and Mike, I'm Matt Carpenter. I can't begin to thank you enough for saving Ranger. The story Matt shared transformed their understanding of the past year. He was a backcountry guide who had been on a solo camping trip with Ranger the previous winter when disaster struck. We were 3 days into a trek when an unexpected storm hit, he explained, voice occasionally catching. While securing our camp, I slipped on ice and fell down a ravine, broke my leg, cracked ribs, and knocked myself unconscious. Ranger had stayed with him initially, but as night fell and temperatures dropped dangerously, Matt made the difficult decision to send the dog for help. He was trained for search and rescue before I adopted him. Matt continued. I attached a note to his collar and commanded him to seek help. He didn't want to leave. It took 3 attempts before he finally went ARC. Rangers found Matt the next day, hypothermic but alive. He spent 2 weeks hospitalized, and by the time he could join the search for Ranger Winter, conditions had worsened dramatically. The area was hit with the worst blizzard in decades. Matt said Ranger's note and tent collar were found near a ranger station, but no sign of him. We assumed he'd tried to return to me and got caught in the storm. For the past year, Matt had conducted his own search, working with park services, distributing flyers, and checking shelters across Colorado and Wyoming. Sarah and Mike shared their side, the gradual trust building, weekly feedings, and finally the mountain line encounter that forced Ranger to accept their help. You did everything right, Matt said, emotion visible in his eyes. The patience, the consistency. No wonder he eventually trusted you. They visited Ranger together in a larger examination room. The shepherd's ears perked immediately, his tail thumping weakly when he saw Matt. His entire demeanor transformed. He attempted to stand, despite his injuries, whining with unmistakable recognition. Easy, buddy, Matt soothed, kneeling beside him. I found you. I never stopped looking. Sarah and Mike watched with conflicting emotions. The bond between Ranger and Matt was beautiful, yet they couldn't help feeling a sense of loss. After their year of dedication, Ranger solved their dilemma himself. After greeting Matt, he turned toward Sarah and Mike, whining until they approached. When they knelt beside Matt, Ranger licked Sarah's hand, then pressed his head against Mike's palm, acknowledging their connection too. He knows what you did for him, Matt said quietly. They never forget kindness. As they prepared to leave, Matt addressed the unspoken question. I live about 3 hours from here, he said. I'd like to keep in touch and have you visit Ranger whenever you want after What you've done your part is life. Now, too, Sarah felt the tension release. We like that, she said, Mike nodding in. Agreement we've grown pretty attached to. Him, I understand completely, Matt replied. With genuine empathy, I think there's room in his life for all of us summer. Painted Colorado in vibrant greens and wildflowers as Sarah and Mike drove toward Matt Carpenter's property. Outside Laram, Wyoming, 3 months had passed since Rare's rescue, and this would be their third visit to what Matt called Ranger's extended family reunion. Do you think he'll remember what we brought? Sarah asked, glancing at the well-worn tennis ball on the dashboard, the same one they had first introduced to Ranger during their wilderness trust. Building Matt's home sat on 15 acres. Backing up to National Forest as they arrived, they spotted him working on a training obstacle course near the main house. The welcome committee is on his way, Matt called, pointing toward the tree in where a black and tan figure was already racing toward them. Ranger, fully recovered and restored to magnificent condition, bounded across the property. With joyful purpose, his coat gleamed in the sunlight, old scars barely visible beneath healthy fur, the transformation from the skittish, solitary creature they'd first encountered was nothing short of miraculous. The shepherd reached Sarah, first dancing around her with enthusiasm, but showing impeccable manners only when she gave the release command. Say, hello. Did Ranger rear up to places, paws gently on her shoulders in a canine hug? There's my wilderness boy. She laughed as he dropped back down and repeated the greeting with Mike over lunch. Matt shared recent developments. I've been approached about Ranger joining our county search and rescue team, he explained. Their trainer says his wilderness experience actually makes him uniquely qualified. That's perfect, Sarah said, watching Ranger lying contentedly between their chairs, occasionally shifting his attention between them as if keeping track of all his people. Later, they hiked to a scenic overlook on Matt's property. How did he get the name Ranger? Mike asked as they rested. Matt smiled. He came with it from his first career as a Park Service dog, specializing in finding lost hikers. When they retired him, he was too independent-minded for their program. I adopted him. The name seemed too perfect to change, so he was literally a ranger. Sarah marveled, then tried to save you. Survived alone in ranger territory, and now he's going back to rescue work. Full circle before they left, Matt revealed his surprise, a wall displaying frame photographs chronicling Ranger's journey, their trail camera images from his wilderness year, Matt's original adoption, photos and new pictures of all of them. Together, I'm calling it the journey home, Matt said, giving them each packages containing duplicate collections. There goodbye followed the pattern from previous visits, not a final farewell, but a see you soon, with dates already planned for next month. As they drove away, Ranger performed his customary ritual, sitting attentively beside Matt, visible in the rear view mirror, until the road curved. You know, it still amazes me, Mike said. A year ago we thought we were rescuing him. Turns out he was never truly abandoned. Sarah nodded, understanding the deeper truth. Maybe that's what makes this ending feel so right. We didn't just find him a home, we helped him find his way back to the one he already had. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and leave a like, share it with someone who needs a reminder that perseverance and compassion can lead to unexpected blessings. Sometimes what appears to be abandonment is really just a detour on the journey.